Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking a moment to listen to the 7 Principles of Survey Excellence, the webinar. We have come to love surveys, strangely, I know, and we want to share a couple of things we've picked up along the way through our work with young people around designing and implementing surveys and strategies. And hopefully it's something that can really add value to your work in the same space. So let's get started. We're not going to cover off on everything today, but we'll try to get through some of the most important stuff that we've picked up. So as far as a little bit of an intro as to who I am, my name is Natasha Munasinghe. I'm the Managing Director of an organization called the Frank Team. We're a training and education organization, and we worked in the youth space since about 2003 with youth organizations, local governments, universities, around things like training, development, youth strategy, and so forth. As far as what's in the name, as a bit of a side note, Frank Team, it pretty much means it's no BS. We tell it to you straight, what's working, what's not. We're frank with you. So hopefully, when we are running through this survey, we'll share with you stuff that's learned, stuff that we've picked up by being frank with you. So the first principle, really it's about being very clear about your purpose and your target market. So you want to really ask yourself, what is it that you actually want to learn from this survey? For instance, if you want to do a survey for, let's say, 14-year-olds versus a survey for uni students, it's going to differ in things like language, style, length, the type of questions you ask. So that initial research you do about your purpose and your target market is super important because it will guide you into things like your format, how is the survey going to be distributed, and so forth. So once you're clear on purpose and your target market, and you can do this in a planning meeting, you can get your youth team involved, you want to then move on and figure out, well, what's the best way to survey. So there are many ways to do it. We're going to be focusing on really questionnaires, but you might also want to consider things like interviews and focus groups, and each has its pros and cons. So as far as a bit of a research, a bit of some sort of quick facts, SurveyMonkey, the survey organization, did some research of about 400 people, and they asked them various things about, how they deal with surveys, how they respond to surveys, and so forth. And they asked them the question, what type of surveys do you prefer? So what percentage of people actually preferred online surveys? And from this particular survey, they found that in the whopping majority, 91%, actually preferred online surveys. Now, in our experience most recently, we're doing a bit of work around youth strategy with a local council in Victoria, and for them, it was actually a face-to-face that was preferred by the target market, which was sort of 12 to 24-year-olds. And in this case, the youth team and the staff would go to the local schools. They'd have the hard copy surveys and hard copies, and everyone would sit down and sort of in one go finish that off. And that really worked. So they beat the survey target by a couple of hundred responses by having really a strong face-to-face engagement. So as a bit of a summary, when it comes to how you're going to do it or what your strategy is around distribution, you really want to figure out what's your target market, what are their needs, things like location, access to technology, etc., all play a part. Another quick fact, SurveyMonkey asked, as far as the question, the most number of people, how long will you actually spend time filling in a survey? And the response was, the majority of people would spend up to 5 minutes, really, up to 5 minutes. And then followed by 33% of people who would do about 10 minutes. So 5 minutes is still a long time, but you just want to make sure you keep your survey short, you don't waste their time, and also really ask great relevant questions, because if they are great and they're engaged, certainly this survey shows that people will give you the time to fill that out. And that also is a SurveyMonkey survey. So as far as a bit of a pro tip, just make sure it's really targeted. Another bit of a quick fact, what percentage of people actually fill in a survey because of an incentive, like a gift or a discount. So this is also from that SurveyMonkey survey, and they found 34%. So just over a third would be filling in because of an incentive. So, on one hand, you don't want to encourage too much incentives because people will rush through the survey and won't really take it seriously as far as giving you feedback. But on the other hand, people may not be compelled to give you their feedback unless they have some sort of incentive, or they'll give it to you only if they have an extreme opinion about something, whether it's really good or really bad. And of course, there are different ways to incentivize. With the recent survey we did with the local council, we didn't incentivize, and like I said before, there were sort of 200 more responses than they'd anticipated. So that was a great result. So moving on to the third principle, that's really being able to pay attention to your survey questions, the language, and the structure of the survey. So as far as a few tips on this, you really want to keep it quite simple and targeted, like I've just spoken about. You really want to speak the language of your target market. Don't make it foreign to them. Avoid things like double negatives. Avoid technical words, jargon, unless your target market understands it or needs that type of language. If you use acronyms, make sure explain those acronyms. If you want to ask about your organization or any organization, ensure that you give a bit of a descriptor on what that organization does. Don't just assume that they know what that organization does. And also, ask one idea at a time or per question. So let's say an example question was, how organized and interesting was the speaker? Well, in that particular question, you're actually asking two things. One is how organized, and the second was how interesting. But if you're asking those 2 points in one question and someone scores it, let's say moderately, what actually are they assessing? Are they saying they're organized and interesting? You don't really know. So a better way to do that is to break that one question into two questions. So you could say, how organized was the speaker? That's your first question. And the second question was, how interesting was the speaker, for instance. Also, think about giving time frames for your questions. So let's say an example would be, instead of asking, how many hours of TV do you watch? You could say, in a week, how many hours of TV do you watch? Because that gives someone a bit of context. It helps them to understand that actual question instead of being too general. As a bit of a pro tip, you might want to check out or Google SurveyMonkey's. It's called a question bank, and they have a range of different template questions just to help you get started, and particularly if you're quite new to this. As far as the fourth principle, the idea of always really following up. So once again, the SurveyMonkey found that actually 40% of people who fill in a survey actually think the organizations only pay a moderate amount of interest to the feedback and to the surveys they receive. So, which is really a lot of people thinking that you don't really care about what they say. So remember to follow up. You might need to grab some contact details of participants, at minimum an email address. Or another way is, at the introduction of the survey, the introduction paragraph, you could customize it and say, let the participants know how you'll be using the information, and let's say where the results will be published, just to give them a heads up and also to make them feel like actually you're really listening to them, so closing that loop. The fifth principle I want to talk about was really to pay attention to the type of questions you ask. So you could ask open or closed questions. If they're open questions, you've got to figure out, well, how will you measure the results against all the other survey responses? And you want to be really clear on why you're using open questions. If you're using closed questions like multiple choice or matrix questions, ensure that you provide enough options for people to give you quality responses. And avoid having options which say none of the above or don't know, because it encourages people to skip the question and use these as a bit of a default. So really pay attention to your questions, and also we're going to be talking a little bit about in the next principle testing your survey. And in your testing, you could find out which question worked better. And we always say, at least test with 5 to 10 people after you put your questionnaire together and see it's effective, see if they understand it. The test group should reflect your target market, and also, leave room to tweak it where it's the test group tells you tweaking is needed. The final principle is really to establish your survey distribution strategy. So, you're going to put a lot of work put in this survey together. You might have a few meetings. You might get a youth group excited about it. And you really want to make sure you set yourself up to succeed when it comes to getting the responses. So once you have the structure and format sorted out, you should look to have strong and committed partners who will distribute your survey on your behalf. So, get them excited and inspired by the survey. Maybe invite them to a planning meeting or workshop. Also ensure they actually have strong networks to distribute it to, and follow up with them. So at least have, one person that you can follow up with as opposed to just an organization. And you might not know that the survey sort of gets lost somewhere in there. In the youth sector, there are so many youth services and youth providers that have great networks, but it's sort of really up to you to tap into them and make sure they're distributing it forward. So that was very much as far as the survey we just did with the local council in Victoria. They had a very strong local network who were very engaged, and that had, that was one of the reasons that they had so many extra responses than they had anticipated. And also, you can use your youth group as ambassadors when they're distributing it. So that was a short webinar, but we wanted to cover off on the main things and the 7 principles of survey excellence. I hope it's added some value to you and to your work, delivering youth surveys or youth strategies. If you have any questions about anything we've chatted about, my direct email is there, and so is our number. Give us a call, sorry. And if there's any way we can support your work with surveys or putting together youth strategies, of course, we'd love to talk. So good luck with your work. And we're trying to get more webinars about sort of youth skills like these up on the Youth Network. So stay tuned to that and have a great day. Thanks, guys. Bye.